Hi y'all, it's Charlene from the Crafty Art Shack, and we're back here today doing another challenge video. Now this one's a napkin DIY challenge. I use napkins from time to time in my projects, but never in every project I do. So this one turned out quite interesting. So let's get to the craft desk and get started. Alright, here we go with DIY number 1. For this first DIY, I got this little photo frame stand from the thrift store, and I'm going to take it completely apart before I get started with this DIY. Now that piece that I'm holding in my hand that I'm screwing in, that even comes apart, and you're going to need to take it completely apart for this DIY. Now for this DIY, I used a napkin from Catherine over at A Perfect Place to Start. Now the first thing I did is I took all the plastic pieces and sanded them down so that my Mod Podge would have something to grip onto. Now after you sand, you do need to wipe everything down. And then the next thing I did is I put my Mod Podge on, and then you see me here with the plastic wrap in my hand. And I decided to cut this stuff into little strips because it would be easier for it to go on. And then I started putting the little pieces on and overlapping it. And then after I got finished, I took and set that aside so it could dry. And then I took out the photo frame itself, and I did take this apart. I started out with it together, but then I realized it would be better if it was taken completely apart. So do that first. And then I'm just going to add Mod Podge, and you don't want to get it in those slits is what I'm showing you there. But if you take it apart, you don't have to worry about that. But you just want to make sure that when you wrap it around that you do not go over your little pegs in the back that attach it to itself. Now here I am finishing up the second one, and then the next thing that I'm going to do is wait for it to dry, put it all back together, and sand that base, and then add a little jute bow and a little ladybug, and we'll see the rest of this at the final reveal. Now today's video is a napkin DIY open challenge. It is hosted by all the ladies that you see here: Make It With Mia, A Perfect Place to Start, Krafty Leeny, Happiness Created, Rustic Lace DIY, OK, At Home DIY, and us at the Crafty Art Shack. All these ladies are doing an awesome job doing their crafts and stuff. Go check them out. Tell them Charlene sent you. Also check out anybody on the playlist because they're doing some awesome crafts and you sure don't want to miss it. Now here we go with DIY number 2. Now for this DIY, I was gifted a whole case of these Lazy Susans by a real sweet lady that lives near me. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take apart my napkin. Now this napkin came from Zane over at OK At Home DIY. And I thought it was absolutely gorgeous. Now what you see me doing here is taking the layers apart. Now this napkin, I guess because of the printing that they did on it, it was a little harder to get apart than most napkins, but it is absolutely gorgeous. Then the next thing I did is I took my Lazy Susan and placed it face down on my napkin so that I could make sure it was going to fit. Now I've already painted my Lazy Susan with Rust-Oleum Linen White Chalk paint, and the next thing I'm going to do is dry fit everything on here to make sure it's going to fit. Then after I know everything's going to fit, I take and remove that napkin piece, put it out of my reach of my hands, and I am going to cover my whole top of my Lazy Susan with Mod Podge and let it dry. Then the next thing that I do is I lay down, after my Mod Podge is dry, I lay down my napkin that goes in the center, and I lay down, what is that stuff called? It is parchment paper. Make sure you use parchment paper, not wax paper. And I just iron this on with my little mini iron, and then I'm going to put the pieces on the side and iron them in. Now my suggestion to you, it does take 2 napkins to do this project because the Lazy Susan is so big. So when you go to do your pieces on the side and you do that second napkin, don't cut it, just cut strips of it so that you can place it on there. And I'll show you. Here's what I'm talking about. I'm trying to match up the pattern the best I can so it looks continuous. and then I will trim the edge of that off. And actually what I do is I end up going and sanding it with my sanding block once I get everything on here. After I finish that, I take this beautiful little mason jar napkin that Brenda over at Rustic Lace DIY sent me, and I took it down to where I only had one layer, and then I took in fussy cut the little jar out, and now what I'm doing here is I'm sanding around the edges. This is why I said you don't really need to do that first step where I laid it down. Now be really careful, because you'll do what I did and flip up that napkin. You don't want to accidentally sand it off. So I just put my iron back down on it to make sure it was completely down really good, and finished sanding it. Now what you see me doing here is I've turned this to where the pattern's lined up, and I am going to see where it falls on that pattern and kind of make a mental note of that, so that I can paint a white background behind this, because I don't want the napkin that I put on previously to show through. So what I'm going to do is, you see me kind of measuring it out with my paintbrush there, so that I can kind of know where it's going to sit, because I'm going to paint with Rust-Oleum Linen White Chalk paint right behind where that little design is that I'm going to put on there. Now here's where I paint the little white background on it, and what I'm doing is I'm measuring to see if I went up tall enough and wide enough for those little flowers. Now what I wish I had done is traced out with pencil the inside of that little, just inside of that little white line, because a little bit too much of the white was showing when I actually put it down. Now after the chalk paint is dry, I'm going to lay my little jar down, and that white makes the jar pop. So what you see me doing here is I'm putting Mod Podge down, and then I'm going to put my design down. And then after that's dry, I go back over it with the Mod Podge again to give it a coat. And I actually make sure that there's no little edges sticking up or anything like that. Now I'm going to go all the way around this little jar and the whole top of the Lazy Susan. Once that's done, I'm going to let it dry, and we'll see the rest of this at the final reveal. Now at this time, we'd like to give a special shout out to our subscribers. We love you bunches, and we really appreciate everything you do for us. And here we go with DIY number 3. Now for this little DIY, I used this little flower pot that came from the Dollar Tree. And I'm getting rid of some of this stuff. Now that little paintbrush, I was gonna throw it away, but I decided I'm gonna save that, because I could use that brush as a dowel rod for another project. So the first thing I'm going to do is paint this with Rust-Oleum Linen White Chalk paint. Then the next thing I did is I chose this napkin from Krafty Leeny, and I took off the border off of this, and I'm going to trim it up with using the fray method by using a little bit of alcohol and using the paintbrush and going around that little edge. This gives it a softer edge when you're applying it to your project. So I always like to do this, and I just use alcohol because it evaporates pretty quick, and then when I'm ready to use it on my project, it's ready to go. Now the next thing I'm going to do is set it up against the bottom edge of my watering can, because I'm going to need to trim this down, because I don't want it to come over that little flower, and save this piece that I'm trimming off, because I'm going to use it in this project as well. Now I noticed that there was a little flower on my watering can, so what I did is I went back in here and I took one of these flower sets sorry about that, and I trimmed it out, because I want to use it on my watering can. Now I'm going to trim out 2 of them. At first I just trim out one, and then I go back later and trim out another one, and I'm going to add it to the watering can, and then I'm going to add my trim to the bottom of it. And you see me looking at it there to see what it's going to look like. So I kind of fussy cut out the flower that I want to be on this side. Then I'm going to lay it on the little flower pot to see what it looks like, and I'm going to finish trimming this out just like I did the other piece, because I want it to have that frayed edge for the same reason. I got the flowers cut out for both sides and the trim for the bottom. I'm going to take that piece that I cut off of the bottom of my trim that's going to go around the bottom of my watering can, and I'm going to add it to the top over here at the spout. Now the next thing I do is I put down Mod Podge over that little flower side, and I'm going to add my little flower on there, and it's not going to matter whether it's bumpy or not. It just adds character to this little flower that I'm going to Mod Podge on here. I'm going to put this one on, and I'm going to put the other one on the other side. Then after I get the flowers put on both sides, then I'm going to come back in with that bottom trim. Now I'm going to start where the handle is, and I'm going to kind of fit it around that little handle so that it has a smooth transition from one side to the other. When you get to the other side, you're going to need to make a little slit, and you're going to kind of fit that around that little handle so it looks like it was just made just like this, and it looks good. Yeah, something like that. And you'll just fit that around that little handle. You may need to trim some of it off just like I did, because you don't need all of it. Next thing I did is I made me a little bow out of the jute twine. I made one for the little photo frame stand and one for this little flower pot. Next thing I did is added a little piece of floral foam in there. I did not glue it in, and I'm going to add some little flowers and add my little bows, and we'll see the rest of this at the final reveal. Now today's video is a napkin DIY open challenge. It is hosted by all the ladies that you see here. Make It With Mia, A Perfect Place to Start, Krafty Leeny, Happiness Created, Rustic Lace DIY, OK, At Home DIY, and us at the Crafty Art Shack. All these ladies are doing an awesome job doing their crafts and stuff. Go check them out. Tell them Charlene sent you. Also check out anybody on the playlist, because they're doing some awesome crafts and you sure don't want to miss it. Now here we go with the final reveal. Alright, you guys, we're back from the craft desk, and didn't these turn out absolutely gorgeous? You guys, if you like this content, like our videos, give us that big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Crafty Art Shack. We'll see you later. Bye!
You guys, if you like this content, subscribe. Yeah, that's what I want you to do, is subscribe and watch it. Today with a napkin DIY challenge. Now, from time to time, I do what I would do different. And you guys, I hope you stay tuned for that. Yeah, I hope you do. Yeah, hope I'm not that boring. It helps us out. And if you're already a subscriber, we love you bunches. Yes, we do. Absolutely, because without you, there would be no me. So, or us, or what is it called? Something. And you can take and put a picture on this side and this side, and yeah, that's what you can do. Sure is. Like you didn't know. I cracked myself up. Alright, y'all, give us that big thumbs up and subscribe. Hit that notification bell, and we'll see you in the next episode. See you later. Bye.